man, we just keep screwing it up when it comes to infrastructure. If you don't invest in the infrastructure, you're not participating in the AI economy. I don't think we should think of it as a technology anymore. It's a utility in the way that electricity is a utility. It's been invented by us for the benefit of us.
Greg Cross, Kiwi entrepreneur, co-founder of Soul Machines.
He worked alongside Dr. Mark Sagar, two-time Academy Award winner for scientific and engineering work.
He was behind King Kong and Avatar.
The big companies in the US that say they're laying off people because of AI, no, they're laying off people because they recruited too many people during the good times and now they can't afford them. Most of the large language model companies, if somebody invented something completely new tomorrow, all of a sudden the capital went away, most of those companies wouldn't survive either.
Why would it go into receivership? Why didn't it grow bigger and bigger and attract more funding for research to grow more?
The vast majority of decisions you make are based on a whole series of assumptions. One of the key things that I say continuously to people that'll listen to me is...
Today's episode is brought to you by AcademyEx, New Zealand's premier postgraduate institute for business owners and professionals. They're an absolute game changer for New Zealand business owners and professionals who are ready to stop talking about the next level and actually build the skills to get there. You can hit the link below or scan the QR code on your screen to learn more about AcademyEx. In 2016, you said that AI is not going to replace humans.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe 2017, but they will work alongside of them. Do you still believe that?
Absolutely, 100%.
Why is that?
Because I fundamentally believe AI is. I don't think of it. I don't think we should think of it as a technology anymore. It's a utility.
Mm-hmm.
In the way that electricity is a utility.
Yeah.
It's been invented by us for the benefit of us. So I see, I've always seen AI as an opportunity for us to figure out how we solve some of the most complex problems that we've created for ourselves in the world. And I still passionately believe that. You can call me. We have lots of dystopian views on artificial intelligence and lots of pessimistic views. I'm an optimist, and I believe, I passionately believe that it will. Of course, it will bring lots of change, new technologies, new utilities, whether it's been the railways, the electricity, now AI, can make our world a better place. It will change many things in our world, without a doubt. It will create new industries. It will change the job market and the labour market, without a doubt. But I still absolutely, I actually believe that more passionately today than I did, 10 years ago when I said that.
It's been about 10 years. So did you expect, because you were involved we'll get into Baby X and Soul Machines and all the rest of it, even the Pixar, what was it? Pixar, Power by Proxy.
Yeah.
All this technology involves very smart thinking, very clever thinking. So, but then back in 2016, did you expect AI to look like how it looks like right now and how smart it is? Would you think, oh no, it's going to take a lot longer than 10 years?
10 years ago, I don't think anybody could honestly say, and if you were, standing in 2016, which I was, and saying in 2026 AI will have been completely democratized. Everybody will have access to it on their smartphone. I don't think anybody was predicting it at that point in time.
You didn't see that coming.
No, I don't think anybody did. Elon Musk didn't, Sam Altman didn't. Many of these companies, were only just coming into existence in 2016. That chat GPT moment in 2022, was almost accidental. So in many, many respects, if you go back to think about it, OpenAI was a public benefit corporation, AI for the benefit. Nobody expected, what has happened and the way it's happened since what I call that chat GPT moment in 2022. And you can go back decades looking at the different generations of AI technologies, because what we have, AI is, I call it, at its core, it's a bucket of technology and a whole bunch of different fields of research. And large language models just the latest of those. So, the early machine learning algorithms and technologies date back to the 50s and 60s, and there have been numerous attempts, in the late 80s when I was living in Boston. There were a bunch of AI spinouts out of MIT back in that era, and it never caught on. It never took off. The underlying technologies to make it do that just didn't exist. So, it's, this is, AI has been a long time, coming and a long time developing. And look, we're still just in the, in my opinion, we're just at the very, very early days of it.
Early stages. Obviously, the government is chasing, is it 25 to 35 billion of data centers investment? So, correct me if this is wrong, but AWS is building $7.5 billion $1 billion data center. And there's I think one in Invercargill, one in Southland.
Yeah, that's a privately owned one. Data Grid, I think it's called. There's been a lot of publicity recently about it. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on data centers?
The simple reality is they are, if you think of AI as a utility, dams, electricity generation capability, distribution capability. That is the infrastructure of the electrical world that we live in. Data centers are the infrastructure, and electricity, by the way, are the infrastructure of the world that we're creating at the moment. So, they are a very, very essential part of it. And
what about the impact of that on the environment, or just impact on people? I don't know too much about it. I haven't delved. Yeah, but what do you know?
Obviously, you look at stuff. I'm not in the data center business myself, but obviously, it's something that gets discussed incredibly heavily. It becomes really, really important. Could you imagine? And I put it into using electricity as a context. If New Zealand had decided that we didn't want to dam our rivers and create hydroelectricity plants to generate electricity, what sort of country would we be today? And of course, if you think about that, damming rivers and flooding towns and farmland, which is what happens when you dam rivers. And this happened, back in the, in the post-World War II era. So, we didn't have the environmental awareness and consciousness that we had today. So, all of these big shifts do require, us to think, very, very differently. And look, please don't get me wrong. I think it's incredibly important we have the right conversations about, the impact on the water table, the impact on land usage, the impact, the impact on electricity.
Because do you have concerns at all about data centers?
I have two concerns. For me, one, New Zealand is very late to the party. So, if you don't invest in the infrastructure, you're not participating in the AI economy, and the AI economy is the future of the world's economy. So let's be clear about that. So, one, we're very late to it. Yeah. So that's, and two, when it comes to infrastructure, let's be clear as New Zealanders, we have a pretty embarrassing record on investing in infrastructure and making good infrastructure decisions. So I am really concerned about the way in which we think about this new, the way we are thinking about and approaching this new generation of infrastructure development, which is going to be absolutely critical to our country and our society and our economy going forward. Because I can go back and look at the the decades of my life and say, man, we just keep screwing it up when it comes to infrastructure. So they are my concerns. So
hello, thanks for watching this video. Quick note, have you subscribed? Over 90% of people who are watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify or on Apple are not subscribed or following. Please do so now. It's so simple. The button will be around the screen somewhere. You either hit subscribe or hit the follow button or leave me a review. It will help me so much, helps me grow as a channel and support my work. So I really appreciate it. Okay, back to the episode. Because do you know if these ones that are built in Southland, are they, you were saying, privately owned? Mm-hmm. What does that quite mean? Does that mean who's owning
it?
It
means investors and entrepreneurs have acquired the land, have pursuing the necessary planning and resource consents and building the investing in building the facilities. So that's there are lots of Microsoft has invested in some data centers here. Datacom has data centers here. CDC, which is a big Australian company, which is half owned by Infratil, which is a New Zealand private equity company. They have data centers here. So, but there are data centers and there are the hyperscale AI data centers. And so. As I understand it, this is one of the first of that type of data center imagined for New Zealand. I spend a lot of time, in the US, and the rate of investment and build in data centers in the US is just astonishing. And in the US, they're bringing old nuclear power plants back online. They're recommissioning old nuclear power plants.
Please help me understand what that means.
Well, the one, if you think about upstate New York, there was Green Island. It was one of the nuclear reactors had a meltdown, and they shuttered it a number of years ago. And because this huge investment that companies like OpenAI and Tesla and SpaceX are all making, and Microsoft, Google, all making in these enormous data centers now, they've got to find new sources of electricity, and creating new electricity generation capability, is decades of planning in itself. So, one of the things that they've started doing in the US to provide the additional power supply for these big AI data centers is recommissioning some of the old nuclear power plants in different parts of the US. So, so these are all, becoming, big considerations, where, because, they are, certainly today, and they'll get more efficient over time without a doubt, but, they are one of the big, issues is, and it's a discussion point that, is going on in our papers here on a daily basis now, where does, given New Zealand, at times can be short of electricity, and the New Zealand electricity market, has some structural issues at the moment. Everybody's asking the questions, are AI data centers going to make electricity more expensive for the average Kiwi?
Do you think it will?
I'll be honest, I don't understand the economics of it deeply enough. I just haven't studied it at this point. So, there's lots of different and important discussions. One of the reasons why we have to have AI data centers is, imagine.
Because are they serving us? Are these our data centers in New Zealand? Are they serving ARUs in New Zealand, or are they serving some offshore companies? The answer to that will be both. Okay. But it is really important we have those. Because how are we? You're not a data center specialist, so I'm not here putting you on the spot. I just wonder if how are we firing up the AI that you're using right now.
Well, I mean, the AI we're using now is all being served from data centers offshore.
Right.
Largely, I mean, but I mean, look, AI is shifting really, really quickly. I mean, you can download models which you can run on your laptop, and I mean, so it can, the world continues to change.
Right.
So, I mean, the simple reality is that, I mean, New Zealand companies, New Zealand government has got used to buying, data processing capacity at data centers all over the world. I mean, if you use Microsoft products or Salesforce products, your data could be being processed through, could be load balanced through servers in Australia, Singapore, and the west coast of the US. That's just the way load gets distributed. One of the important conversations with respect to New Zealand, and this is I guess the mirror image of some of the the environmental concerns and some of the discussions that are in the public domain about data centers at the moment. One of the other mirror image discussion is data sovereignty.
Privacy and who's looking at your privacy?
Data sovereignty, who owns data and where your data exists in an AI world. Now, so that's, I mean, obviously also a really, really big discussion for us to have at this point in time.
What have you seen? Like, what are people talking about in New Zealand or overseas in terms of who's actually having access to that data?
Well, I mean, there's certainly a lot of discussion around data sovereignty. Iwi and Māori are having discussions about the sovereignty of their data and the data associated with their people at this point in time.
I did hear you talk about that on RNZ. I wondered what that really means. What does it actually mean? How is iwi, Māori and the data centers have in common, and why them specifically? What about other, like everybody else in New Zealand's data?
Of course. I mean, everybody. Well, I mean, there's two parts to the discussion. And this is how I think about it. There's two parts to the discussion because to a very, very large extent, the conversation of data privacy and data sovereignty is over. Social media means that horse is, out the gate, over the hill and far, far away already. I mean, as we're nearly 20 years into the social media era, now, and there's no prizes for guessing which organisation in the world knows more about New Zealand citizens than any other organisation in the world. Meta. We have been like citizens of every other country in the world, freely contributing our data to Meta via Instagram, Facebook, and WhatsApp, for coming up 20 years now.
So this is data has already been given.
So we've already given. I mean, as I say, if you go back 30, 40 years, the organisation that knew the most about New Zealand citizens was the New Zealand government.
Yeah.
Right? Now that's not true anymore. The organisation that knows most about New Zealand citizens is Facebook, Meta, or Google. We all use Google search, and every search that we do allows them to collect, data and create a profile of us. So in some respects, the data privacy, the data sovereignty issue argument is hypothetical at this point in time. To a point. So, all of that data is gone. It is in the hands of companies that are way too powerful, as we all accept and acknowledge today. Mm-hmm. Many of the same companies that are trying to drive, the next generation, and become the AI era, powerhouses. The large language models exist because, these companies figured out how to scrape the internet and everything that we, as businesses, individuals have published, on the internet. They were able to scrape the internet and train these models based on all the data in the world. So, that's how they came into existence. So, data sovereignty to this point is, in many respects, is a moot point because a lot of it, the data is already out there. What we do need to think carefully about, and what we do need to have a debate about, and I think it's a really, really important debate, is where does our data go from here? Because, people think about AI as, and we all use Claude or ChatGPT on a daily basis, and that enables us to have access to this incredible knowledge. You can become, the amazing thing is you can become an expert in anything you choose to be. You want to ask great questions about any topic in the world, and you can become, and you really focus on it, and you want to put the effort in, and you're curious enough and creative enough, you can become the world's foremost expert in anything you choose today, if you want. So that's, what's achievable with the data that already exists today. But AI is also an incredibly powerful platform for us to create and collect completely new layers of data. And it is the new layers of data that, AI enables us to create as consumers, as citizens, as business leaders, as business owners. It's the new layers of data where we really need to be thinking carefully about the privacy, the proprietary nature, and the sovereign rules around that data.
What's that new layer? What do you mean?
Well, that new layer is, is what's ultimately becomes whatever is important to you and the organisation that you are part of. That new layer of data that gets created in the AI era is, it can either become publicly, it can be, you have choices about, you need to think carefully about what is open data and what is proprietary data. What is data that belongs to you, that you want to keep private, that you don't want to share on current digital platforms.
If today's chat has you thinking about how your business needs to deploy software or AI to scale revenue and save time, but your team lacks the technical know-how, AcademyEx can bridge that gap for you. Now, they've launched a new 12-week training program that is focused entirely on hands-on AI software development. This isn't a shallow prompt engineering workshop. You take a real business concept and carry it from a rough idea through a live working application or tool. You will learn to use modern tools like AI coding assistants, handle real design requirements, and experience vibe coding to deploy a working build. It is a genuine development curriculum designed for modern business leaders. So scan the QR code on the screen or hit the link in the description to learn more about this program. And don't delay, because applications close the 10th of September. Hello, thanks for watching this video. Quick note, have you subscribed? Over 90% of people who are watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify or on Apple are not subscribed or following. Please do so now. It's so simple. The button will be around the screen somewhere. You either hit subscribe or hit the follow button or leave me a review. It will help me so much, helps me grow as a channel and support my work. So I really appreciate it. Okay, back to the episode. We've all been told that, for example, Claude has super tight data privacy measures.
Yep.
And it's not going to leak anything out. How true is that? Like, how do we know this is true? And, the companies that are, the CEOs, the business owners listening to this going, how do I know this is true? I mean, we are using it now, but how do we know it's true?
Yeah, and it comes back, that comes back to, this is why I believe this is all about the combination of the human experience with, the utility of AI. This is why, for me, it's so so important. For me, the most, for me, and this is a large part of what I'm focusing on in my own business at this point in time, is the most powerful and most important currency. I'll call it a currency. In this era is the currency of trust.
Yes.
Trust is going to be incredibly important, and it's going to continue to become more and more and more important in this era, because I mean, Claude, you can look at what's happened over the course of this year. Their marketing has been extraordinary. When you think about, the utility of these large language models, I mean, they're all much of a muchness. They're playing this leapfrog, every 2 weeks they, come up with a new version and they leapfrog each other. But, the way in which Claude's marketing engine and the way they have branded themselves and the way they have very, very cleverly messaged has been to augment the trust that people have. Now, and that's trust is based on the very, very emotional human connection of brand trust. Not they are completely transparent. They, we can see exactly where our data is going. We can see exactly how it is being used. We don't have that. So that trust is being based by, on good old fashioned, very clever brand.
How are they doing? How are they doing it?
Well, I mean, they've done that. There's been a number of things, that they've exploited during the course of this year from a marketing. So you go back to, end of last year, beginning of this year, the Super Bowl ads.
Okay.
So if you go back and look at the Super Bowl ads, they targeted ChatGPT because just prior to the Super Bowl, ChatGPT had come out and said, we are going to introduce advertising into our, into ChatGPT. So they're going to use your data to sell you stuff, again, just like the social media guys did. So, all of the Super Bowl ads that Anthropic and Claude ran during Super Bowl was based on, we're not going to be giving you answers to your large language model queries based on who's bought the most advertising from us. I mean, that was basically the message. You can trust us to give you what you want, not what your advertisers are trying to sell you. So
I didn't get it. What did they say? Sorry.
It was just, they were just taking. They position Claude because Claude had said they were going to do advertising. They said, well, we're not going to do advertising. We're going to give you the information you ask for, not the information our advertisers want you to have. So that was kind of the first salvo in their marketing on trust. The second one that I can recall during the course of the year,
sorry, so is Claude actually doing ads?
No, they're not.
On its free version?
No.
Because I'm not with free. I'm paid, so I don't know.
Yeah, no, they don't.
Oh, okay.
They have no. They've been very clear. They are not doing advertising in their large language model. The second one, that had a big impact in the US was around the defence contract. So I think it got some publicity here, but 3 or 4 months ago there was the US government came out and said, we're not going to do business with Anthropic and Claude because, they won't accept our terms and conditions. And so Claude immediately came out and said, well, the only terms and conditions we said we couldn't comply with is we won't allow, one of them, the real emotional topic is, we won't allow our AI to be used in any application which might be involved in acts of war, and killing people. So they came out and said that. And then immediately after that happened, ChatGPT announced that they'd done a deal with the US Department of Defense, Department of War, as it's been renamed in the Trump era, under the Trump presidency. And that created a massive backlash in the US. I mean, huge churn of users from, open AI, from ChatGPT to Claude. And if you map, so I mean, there's a couple of examples of what I'll call very, very clever market positioning, building more trust with end users than ChatGPT and OpenAI. So that's what's built trust. And if you go, you go ask, if you look at you map the revenue growth of, ChatGPT and Claude over the course of the last 12 months. I mean, ChatGPT, was the market leader, and now, was by far the bigger company, and now Claude and Anthropic are generating more revenue. So,
right.
And it's driven by this belief in, this fundamental decision that we're making. I can trust Claude, and Anthropic more than I can trust ChatGPT. It's a very human level instinct. It's a very human level discussion. So, this concept of trust is going to become more and more important to us. And, they will hold that trust until they break it in somehow. So this concept of trust becomes, more and more important to us as we move forward.
What do you make of the whole Fable saga? As to give people background with Fable, so Claude has models that you could select to do a task. Some models are pretty quick and easygoing. Some models are very smart and next level. Claude released a model called
Mythos.
And I actually don't understand Mythos and Fable.
Well, Mythos became Fable.
Okay, so but I don't understand the change in names, but they had a big hoopla with, like the government in the US, and they put it on hold and things. Yeah,
geopolitics. So
what is it, and how significant is that for New Zealanders? Because we're living here.
Well, so it's kind of interesting. So there's two parts to this. So once again, clever product marketing by Claude. So they came out and they had this product in beta, the next version of their model called Mythos, which when they, in beta testing, it's like, this is, too powerful, we can't launch this at this point in time.
For you, what does it mean, too powerful?
Well, we can't, we haven't been able to put enough constraints on it to we don't feel safe. We don't feel like this is safe enough to release. So they came out and said that.
They said
that publicly. Claude, Anthropic came out and said that publicly. I mean, and this is my view of it. Other people may take another view of it, but my view of it is I think about it and look at it, and I'm just a user of this technology like most people, an advanced user, but so they came out and said, well, we're not going to release Mythos, and so they paused. And
so why would you create something that is super smart and then go, sorry guys, this is super smart, we're not going to give it to you? It's just like, here's the steak, but we're not going to give you the steak.
Well, I mean, and this is, part of the thing. I mean, at the end of the day,
it's really interesting.
These models are, because these models are developing themselves, and and the coding is being done by the models, so that companies, when they're developing these products and they're training these products, they're pushing the edge so hard that they're not exactly sure what they're going to end up with. So so they came out and said, this is, we're not comfortable. We're not going to release this. So they went back to the labs and they put a whole bunch more constraints, and this is their marketing message talking. So I'm just, and they then released Fable. And Fable came out. And then the US government did stepped in again and said, well, this is the most powerful model in history. We don't think the whole world should have access to it at this point in time. We want to make sure that we want to have our say in it. So the US government put a block, and then Anthropic had to come out and block New Zealand users from having access to Fable. I think we had access for about a week, I guess, and then it disappeared. Yeah. And then then the US government worked out that we either worked out that they couldn't stop them legally, or that or they were and all of a sudden it got re-released again. So that's kind of the journey. But I mean once again, that all makes Anthropic more, in some, if you think about that, those steps, that people are making that judgment that maybe we can trust Anthropic more than we can trust somebody else to do this stuff. The second aspect of what you touched on is the geopolitical stuff, and there is just as there was the space race to get to the moon between the Americans and the Russians. We now have the space, the space race of the AI era between the Americans and the Chinese. And it is geopolitical, and it's being made to be geopolitical. The American government is constraining the supply of chips to the latest NVIDIA chips to China, so which Jansen Huang, continues to push back on,
But can't just China make their own chips?
Well, I mean, eventually, and they are making their own chips. They're not as good as the state-of-the-art American chips. But I mean, and this is the problem that you get into is, when you start trying to artificially constrain things, people get really innovative and try and find ways around it. So. And there's some fundamental differences between, American AI and Chinese AI. So American AI, when we think about American AI, we think about OpenAI and ChatGPT. We think about Anthropic and Claude. We think about X and Grok. So they're the big players in the consumer AI space. When we think about, and so all of that is, what I think about, or what, that's proprietary AI. That is, AI models being developed by companies who have raised eye-watering sums of money, and they own that AI and they're selling that AI to the world. So that's what I'd call proprietary AI. The majority of Chinese AI, so that's one part of the AI universe. The other part of the AI universe is open source AI. So the open source AI community today is being driven largely by US universities and academics. So, I mean, a lot of the research in US universities on the future of AI is being done in the academic institutions in the US. They publish that software under open source licenses in the open source repositories. And the Chinese engineers are all based, or most of the Chinese model and the big movement in Chinese AI is leveraging open source AI. So if you go back to, I think it was middle of last year, and we had the DeepSeek moment when, all of a sudden the world became aware that a Chinese AI company had developed a model that was almost as good as the American AI. And everybody said, how did they do that? Well, if you've been tracking DeepSeek, they've been, doing their research on an open source model. They've been publishing their research back to the open source model. You could have tracked them all the way through. So, so there are these two worlds, and as much as we think, proprietary AI and ChatGPT and Claude grab all the headline, the fastest growing part of the AI market is actually the open source market.
DeepSeek was bought by Meta?
No, that was another one called Manus.
Oh, Manus. Isn't that Chinese made?
Manus is another Chinese model, yeah.
And then they asked for it back, didn't they?
Yeah, and
what was the story there?
Well, I mean, so
and actually, sorry, before we get to the Manus story, I want to understand all of that stuff. How does it really apply to New Zealand business owners?
Well, I mean, the reality is, I use multiple models, on a daily basis. So, I'm a big fan of Claude.
Do you give it a lot of your data?
Yeah, I use all of the data. I use all of the data protections that I'm afforded to. I am.
How do you make sure that your data is protected? What do you do? What do you switch off?
Yeah, all.
Like, do not share my data. Do not use it as a.
Yeah, of course. The privacy
training.
The privacy settings in Claude are pretty straightforward to turn on. And if you're not sure, go do a bunch of research and make sure you're comfortable with it. If you want to be 100% comfortable, don't put anonymized data or anonymized names before you even put it into a model. It's something that we all face decisions about in terms of what we should and shouldn't do.
Do you ingest, let's say, a meeting that you've had with somebody and you go, what's the summary, send an email to that person, but the name of the person is there, the discussion is there. Do you do that?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Yeah, obviously, whenever I'm doing that, I'm upfront that, do you mind if we take, if we record the meeting and we take, and we summarize notes from the meeting using, something like granola. I think I'm using at the moment to do that.
Granola?
So, yeah.
What's that?
It's one of the best.
It's another.
It's one of the best,
LLMs.
text to speech tools out there, speech to text tools out there, and does great summaries.
Okay. It's like Otter and.
Yeah, I mean, it's a later version of later, in my view, a better version of an Otter. So I mean, some of the tools and the Zoom tools suck, in my opinion. So
they do.
I mean, granola is a great, is a great tool. So always up front with that, and there'll be, and if somebody says no, I don't want to record this meeting, you turn it off. As simple as that.
But you're using LLMs to, like as I do, using LLMs to Claude or chat to summarize things.
Sure.
All the details of the meeting are there, and you've made use of all the toggles in these machines to tell it to not distribute my data to somebody else.
Train the data, yep.
Do not train to use it to train the data. Do you think they'll still have access to that even though you've turned it off?
No. No. Yeah, I mean, look. I mean, you have to. Okay. I mean, there are. The simple reality is that there are data privacy rules, GDPR, and some of the data privacy rules that have evolved during the social media era. Is there a level of trust? I mean, there's always that level of trust involved. I mean, governments have had to change, their legal infrastructure, which says, tax data has to be stored in New Zealand, because, if New Zealand doesn't have data centres, enough data centres, government data is going to get distributed across servers in Australia, I mean, and look, I'm not the expert on the stuff, but, from, at a data centre point of view, but I mean, these have been, practical trade-offs that we've been making, continuously. I mean, and, let's be clear. I mean, social media is a giant algorithm which has been collecting our data, what we like, what we don't like, who we engage with, how we engage with them, what we say to them, what we don't say. Doing that for nearly 20 years. This is very, very sophisticated AI at work already. I mean, so, but this is the next level. And as I say, the questions we need to think about is what do we want to happen next? And it's going to continue to change very, very quickly. As I said, you're going to be able to have, models are, for, increasingly you're going to have companies putting models on your phone, which, are trained on larger models. But I mean, the simple reality is we don't need the power and the complexity of, we were talking about, the latest version of Claude, a few minutes ago. We don't need the power of that to do everything that we do. I mean, the simple reality is, there are. I mean, I do a lot of my work now using free open source models because it might not be the latest and greatest model, but it's more than good enough for the work that I want it to do. So you can save yourself a huge amount of effort by looking at and learning how different tools work.
Hello, thanks for watching this video. Quick note, have you subscribed? Over 90% of people who are watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify or on Apple are not subscribed or following. Please do so now. It's so simple. The button will be around the screen somewhere. You either hit subscribe or hit the follow button or leave me a review. It will help me so much, helps me grow as a channel and support my work. So I really appreciate it. Okay, back to the episode. All these companies, they are releasing things as we speak. Like 9 hours ago, SpaceX released Grok 4.6, claiming that GPT 5.6 Soul and Claude Fable 5 intelligence, meaning that's the top of the top. And then 5 hours ago, DeepSeek upgraded its V4 Pro during comparison to Anthropic's Claude Fable. It's just a race, and who's paying for that race? What's the cost, do you think?
Well, I mean, ultimately, the people paying for that are the investors that are literally giving them tens of billions of dollars to build this stuff. And Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Literally, they're the people that are funding this future. I'll be honest. I turn off. I mean, the noise about whose model's better. For me, I live in this space on a daily basis. I've just turned it all off.
Yeah.
I don't.
Why is that?
Because it's just noise.
Yeah.
What I care about, passionately is how can I use this to make a difference and solve problems for people in the real world. That's what I care about. I don't care about the AI hype. I don't believe in the concept of why do we need artificial general intelligence, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Because nobody can actually even define it properly. So if I look at some of the people that I've met in this space, where you've got Eon, you've got Sam, Dario, they're all obsessed by AGI, and then you've got somebody like Demis Hassabis, who was, until he was CEO of Google's AI business. And he just stepped down and became chairman. Demis was the founder of DeepMind, which got sold, which was a research lab out of London, which got sold to Google back in, I think it was 2017. And Demis's vision for the future of AI, he said it, and he won a Nobel Prize for his work in medicine with AI. He's like, I believe that within 10 years using AI, I can solve for every disease in the world. Now, I can get excited about that. You can get excited about that. We all can get excited about the fact that, somebody can imagine that we can change the way disease impacts people and societies and communities all over the world over the next 10 years. And to me, that is, I can say, that gives me, optimism and hope and belief that this is what we're doing and the opportunities we have in this new world, can be quite profound. And so eliminating the noise and this constant dystopian hype, I'll be honest, it drives me to distraction, and as I say, look, here's the thing, if you consider, 80% of the world is now using AI, but 80% of the world is scared of AI today. So, look at that. That's, one of the biggest constraints to AI making a difference in our lives is if 80% of people are approaching it from a basis of fear, how are you going to solve problems and do anything creative and anything incredible if you're starting from that position of fear? That's just, human nature. It's a human condition.
It's interesting. And I think people will still always have reservations. Maybe they had the same reservations around social media and the internet, but AI is bigger than the internet, I have heard.
Oh, without a doubt. It's as, the internet was a technology and, it became a digital platform for us. AI is not a technology. AI is a utility in the same way that electricity was a utility. And so, one of the things, I often talked about when I first got involved in this era, because AI was, if you go back to the pre-COVID era, we were talking about AI as being part of the fourth industrial revolution. So that's how everybody was obsessing about all of that. Language got lost in the COVID era, which was, in my view, a good thing. But one of the things that I used to talk about a lot was, I used to ask people, well, if we go back to the previous industrial revolution, when we electrified our factories, who were the most displaced workers in our factories? What was, one of the real benefits of the displacement of those workers in our factories? Well, one of the most displaced workers in our factories, when they got around to rebuilding and electrifying factories, was child labour. And as a result of child labour being eliminated from factories, the modern education system was developed. The public education system was developed as a result of the electrification of our factories and children not having to go to work, and the governments of the day deciding they would, along with the corporations, they would invest in building public school systems to educate the kids that were not previously getting an education. So, isn't that, a great story of the way in which, the utility of and the changes that this brings can be used to create incredibly good and powerful things, and important things. So, these are the opportunities that I think about.
And it's a good thing to reshift our focus to what good AI is doing, and maybe research a bit more about what's going on. And I mean, obviously, there's a lot of problems in the world that needs to be solved, and AI is doing that, I think, at some level. So it is a good thing to think about. The other thing I wanted to think about is just in reflecting on your work with notable people like Mark Sagar, Dr. Mark Sagar, and your involvement with Solid Machines. It's a fascinating journey I want to get into. Like, sure. You've raised, would it be right to say $250 million New Zealand dollars to get it up and going and get it to over 10 years, I suppose. Yeah,
I mean, it was a lot of money. Yeah, I mean, and it was, the work that Mark had started when in his research lab at the University of Auckland was really important technology in a very, very specialist field of AI. So
for people who don't know who Mark is.
Yeah, so Dr. Mark Sagar, an Academy award-winning technologist who did some incredible work on the original Avatar movie, which is where he won his first award. So, if you think about some of the big breakthroughs in CGI and the way in which we animate, super high quality digital characters, the Avatar movie was a big breakthrough because all of a sudden we had these giant blue creatures that we fell in love with because of Mark's technology, because he had invented a data capture technology which was able to capture data which mapped human expression and take that human expression from the data that was captured from the actors that were acting the part and put it on the faces of the avatars. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So if you go back and rewatch that movie, the reason we connected so deeply with those characters, and this is why it became such an important movie, is because we connected with the characters. Yeah, we fell in love with the characters, and that was due to the incredible work that Mark did. So he went on to do a couple more movies, further developing that technology. I mean, he did Kong, the Kong remake with Sir Peter Jackson, and I think it was one of the Spider-Man movies, which he won another Oscar for. Then he set up a research lab at the University of Auckland and the Biomechanics Institute, and started researching a field called embodied cognition. So embodied cognition is another very, very specialist field of AI development. So
just what he was doing is pretty much intelligence.
Yeah, or thinking about the way, so Mark's research was based on a human model he created called Baby X. So Baby X was Baby X was an avatar. So it was based on his two-year-old daughter. And so Mark wanted to, rather than have an avatar animated by, a human actor, Mark wanted to experiment with, can I create a form of a digital brain which can simulate and autonomously animate and autonomously bring to life an avatar. So he started doing work with a baby, and why a baby? He started there because most of our neural pathways. So Mark was using taking neural networks and creating models of different functions of parts of the human brain. And connecting them with these neural networks to simulate human behavior. So I mean that's what he did. So human brain works in a very, very natural way. So I mean I always used to do these silly experiments on stage. If I smile at you, you smiled straight back. Now, you didn't make a decision to smile.
Yeah.
Your brain made that decision to smile for you. So you saw me smiling, and the natural reaction to a smile, your eyes pick up, see me smiling, sends a signal, to the, a particular, to the specific part of the brain that secretes a hormone that sends an electrical signal, makes you feel good, serotonin, dopamine, and that electrical signal sends that electrical impulse, that the nerve endings send a signal to the muscles in your face to smile. Completely autonomous. And so, Mark's research was simulating that.
And so he was
behavior.
able to smile at the baby X, and the baby smiles back.
Yeah, I mean, that was the starting point for his experiments. And look, it progressed dramatically from there. I mean,
What did you see? I mean, obviously, because you knew Dr. Mark before that, or how did you end up in his world?
I got introduced to him by a mutual friend. So,
okay.
So Mark had been running his lab for about 3 or 4 years, and I'd come out of my previous venture, Power by Proxy. We got introduced by a mutual friend. Mark had been, had started to be get interest from offshore investors in his research and his technology, and so he needed, a business partner, an entrepreneurial partner to help, think about how do we take this from being a research project into a business, and how do we turn research into a product, into a solution. So that was kind of
and this is your area of expertise.
Yeah, and so that was our collaboration. So we became co-founders and business partners, and started on the process of commercializing and developing the technology. The fundamental value in what we were doing was always in the research, and it remains a very, very important field of research, this embodied cognition, thinking about the way in which we as human beings interact with AI, how we interact with the real world. And one of the I guess you'd call it the fallout for us out of the large language model era, and ChatGPT coming along is, from a product and a solutions point of view, it was good for our product and our revenues and our growth, but it wasn't good for our underlying research, because pretty much all of the research funding in the world, since ChatGPT hit to today, is going into the specialist field of large language model development. And that has meant, other fields of research in AI are completely starved of cash today, and have been for a number of years.
How different is your technology to ChatGPT?
Oh, completely different. Large language models are based on, training, these set of models that are trained on all the data in the world that they can possibly get access to. As an embodied cognition, we're using neural networks to connect and simulate different functions of that exist within the human brain. So very, very different field of research. And you think about some of the applied AI fields, like the humanoid robots that we're seeing. We're seeing all of the hype around humanoid robots, and and how they're coming to a home near you. And but the simple reality is they have no context of the real world. They have no context of us, and they, bluntly today, in most respects, expensive glorified puppets today.
Wouldn't they have your technology in there?
No, our tech. They're trying to. No, they. We never got to, because at the point where we shut down the research functionality. Soul Machines. The whole area of humanoid robots wasn't funded, wasn't attracting money. So that's only happened subsequently to, Mark and I, literally dismantling the research program because there wasn't any funding to continue it with.
Despite the fact that you had $250 million.
Well, but the reality is, when you're building a company, I mean, if you go, you're building, you're raising capital to hire more people to do more work, on the promise that gets you to the next milestone and you raise more money. So, I mean, if you look at most of the large language model companies, if somebody invented something completely new tomorrow, all of a sudden the capital went away, most of those companies wouldn't survive either. Because they're completely dependent on their ability to raise new funding from new investors, to fund their program. They're not cash, they don't generate enough revenues to cover their cash flows. When
you were designing the premise for Soul Machine and how it's going to be commercially viable, how it's going to help the world and add value, I don't know. What did you think that it could help? Like when you're thinking about recreating characters from Hollywood.
Yeah.
Well, have been and gone, or even like characters who not been and gone. They're still alive, but recreating them. I mean, why would people be interested in that?
Well, I mean, for the same. For the same reason, we're interested in, we're interested in what you do. You tell stories, you get other people to tell their stories to you. So, at a very fundamental level, as human beings, we exist to do two things. We exist to procreate, so ensure our species survive. So that's a fundamental biological requirement. And then, and we're fundamentally here to tell stories and pass our culture and our history of our, our societies, our communities, our whānau from one generation to the next. So they are the two fundamental concepts. So the digital world that, has evolved around us, that we've, over the last 20 years, has changed the way, many of the ways we transact, many of the ways we tell stories, many of the things we, the way in which we experience life has changed dramatically. So what, we were, imagining and, our vision for Soul Machines was to create, a digital world where we can create a far more human experience. For people to, to tell stories to each other. So, so if we take, one of the projects that we worked on was with a big K-pop star, Mark Twain from a group called Got 17. Not quite the BTS level, but he, very big at the second tier of the K-pop industry. And so Mark was a very early adopter of our one of the first people we work with, and I mean he would travel around. I mean, he had a huge fan base in Asia, in Thailand, I mean, he could, he'd go to Thailand and he wasn't even performing. So his band wasn't even performing, or he wasn't performing. If he showed up in Thailand, he could fill a football stadium full of fans who just wanted to ask him questions. Okay. And so, so he had a fan base, he had a tribe which wanted to be able to connect with him. So when we created a digital version of Mark and we put it live on the internet, it went nuts. I mean, because it gave, fans the ability to feel like they could interact with one of their heroes, in a very, very personal way. They could have one-on-one question, they could have one-on-one conversations. Now, you can't replicate that in any other way. I mean, we worked with Jack Nicklaus, one of the great golfers of the world. Jack's 84, I think now. Jack, kids into golf today barely remember Tiger Woods, let alone Jack Nicklaus, who was at his prime in the sort of the, I guess he won his last major in probably the early 80s, I think. So, but, when we approached Jack's like, well, I want to create a legacy. I want people to remember me, So we created, Jack, who's 84. We said to Jack, well, what age do you want to be? Do you want us to create a version of you like you are today? And he's like, no, I want to be 38 again. I'm like, well, why do you want to be 38, Jack? He said, because I was playing my best golf when I was 38. I had a family. I mean, I was the best, I feel like it was one of the best versions of me. So we made him 38. I mean, Jack, using AI, Jack could speak in his own voice in Japanese, in Korean. So,
And what did you do with the technology once you've created it? Like, did people buy it? What happened to that? Like,
ultimately,
because obviously what you're creating with Soul Machine is to create a product that people want and need to help them solve a problem.
Yeah, I mean, and for for entertainment and for celebrity, it becomes. Look, people crave. Look what social media has done for the cult of celebrity and fandom.
So, did anyone what did people do with the
replica? So it became
the 38-year-old version.
It became an opportunity. Jack, builds golf courses over the world. He comments on golf tournaments all over the world still. So it provided him another avenue to monetize his brand, which was, we were working with his brand organization. It created another opportunity for people to, for people in different parts of the world to be able to speak to Jack in their native language. So that wasn't, Jack doesn't speak, barely speaks a word of Japanese. He could be talking about a golf tournament in Japan speaking in Japanese, for Mark Twain's fans in Thailand, they could come home, from the day at work, and they could spend their evening talking with their pop star, with their K-pop star. So look, there were lots of different things that we looked at. And look, this is all.
But then you also had other brands.
Oh yeah, we did a lot of work in
motor vehicle brands.
Yeah, General Motors was a client. Infinity, was
BMW,
a client. BMW.
ANZ.
We had a number of small clients here, but most of the big brand work we did. Pfizer was a big client in the US, and they were looking at, Pfizer was looking at using the technology for, in their drug trial programs, so when you go and, a great example of the efficacy of this technology, when you're running drug trials, you actually have to speak to people who are participating in the trial and interview them on a regular basis. And what we were piloting with them was, would they get an
avatar of a nurse or something?
Would they get more? Would they get more data and better data by using an avatar of the staff than using a real person? And the proof point was 100%. People. One of the problems we have from a human connection point of view is we always feel judged by our peers. Mm-hmm. So those sort of pilots and trials that we were doing with organizations like Pfizer started to prove were that people felt way more comfortable talking to an avatar. And this is, it's now being borne out by some of, if you go and do any research on, how many people are using ChatGPT as an advisor, as a mental health advisor. I mean, and trust me, I'm not recommending this or endorsing it, but there are, the simple reality is people are already doing that. I just finished an interesting project in the US in the field of medical education.
Yes.
And here's a very, very fundamental human condition. Think about the way that your relationship with your doctor has changed in the AI era. Because most of us are now going along to our doctor having self-diagnosed ourselves with ChatGPT, right? Yeah, I made the mistake with my physio recently, and I got told off really badly. But
did the LLM got it right?
No, it got it right. But but if you think about how that changes a human relationship, because our doctors, and our health professionals are the most trusted people in our community, right? When we get sick, when we get ill, when a loved one is sick or ill, we trust our health professionals to look after them and make, in some cases, really important decisions about their health. A fundamental human trust. And now you've got somebody showing up, saying, well, actually, I've chat GPT this and I think I've got this, this, and this. Now, if I've used it really well, I have a good insight into what's going on in my body. That's a positive thing. But all of a sudden, you've got, a doctor is sitting there and somebody is actually, questioning their judgment or telling them, I know more about this than you. And that fundamentally changes that trusted relationship, right? And it can be in a good way, but you imagine the first time as a doctor, you come face to face with somebody telling you what's wrong with you and you're like, oh my God, where did this come from? I mean, it's, that's just at a fundamental human level. So, this work I was doing was actually looking at, the changing nature of those relationships. But imagine the worst case outcome where, a doctor can't convince somebody who's self-diagnosed, got it wrong, and they believe ChatGPT more than they believe their doctor. I mean, that's already happening.
Yes, I
mean,
agree.
so so these are some of the fundamental ways in which the ways in which we can think about creating more positive relationships between the way we interface with technology. And that was really a lot of the work we were doing was thinking about how we not just how we create that interaction, that more human level interaction, and create a more trusted level of interaction. But how do we think about the way in what the data that gets collected through that interaction, and because when you're having a face-to-face conversation, you get way more this is the human condition. You get way more context, than the words I'm speaking, and the way I'm telling my story. I mean, there's just all of this layers of context that you don't get when you read a text box.
So, on February 5th, 2026, the company went into voluntary receivership. I understood, and it did owe some money to people, but I want to make sure that this is accurate information, because you raised a lot of money and you worked so hard over like 7 years to make a technology so unique in what you're describing, and to add to the world of connection in a different way, connection and solving problems. That's the whole point.
Yep.
And then ChatGPT came along, and do you think that was the biggest competitor that made you go, it's going to be very difficult for us to create what we need to create? Was it because you left the company? Of course, I need to make sure that people know at home that you resigned as a CEO in September.
I think it was June. I think it was, but
June 2023.
June, and then I stepped out. I can't remember the exact dates now, but
CEO and then from the board, and then obviously Mark left
at the same time.
Around the same time, and so that's around 2023, 2024, and then it went into receivership in 2020, voluntary receivership in 2026. But I just wondered, for such an amazing company, well, it sounded like it was an amazing company, an amazing vision for what you had. Why would it go into receivership? Why would it sort of why can't it be more why didn't it grow bigger and bigger and attract more funding for research to grow more? Great questions. Obviously, once I stepped out of the company, I moved on to building a new company and doing new things. So, I wasn't involved in all the decisions that got it from where it was when I left and where it finished up, I've read what's available in the public domain.
And the receivers have now sold the company, or I believe the receivers have sold the company. Well, I'm not sure whether it's been announced, whether even that's been announced at this point. But I know that the assets that they have been sold. So I don't know the details, but that's out there. But so there's a bunch of layers to the to your question. And a lot of it comes down to, a lot of, when you're involved in deep tech research, commercial, building commercial business, being an entrepreneur, there are things inside of your control. There are things outside of your control.
Yeah, exactly.
We raised a lot of money, because people saw our vision, people saw the value of the research that we were doing, and because the capital markets were prepared to support that. Okay, but then the capital markets started to change. In that post, during the COVID. During that COVID era, the capital markets went through, some significant changes. We saw some major repricing of the tech stocks, in the beginning of 2022. They started to recover, and so all of these have a ripple effect through the capital markets. And when you're doing research like ChatGPT or like Soul Machines and other companies are, when you're doing research, your ability to do that is based on your ability to raise new capital on a regular basis. So there were two big speed bumps in 2022 around with the SaaS market repricing. Then at the end of 2022, we had the FTX and the crypto crash, which completely hit the markets for ability to raise capital. So we were out raising more capital. We were it was promising, but both those had an impact. And then, of course, the market had its we had our market had its ChatGPT moment, and not everybody saw what that meant straight away, but certainly by 2024, if you go back and look at the sums of money that were being raised and were going into that, it just meant other forms of AI, other fields of AI research were just not getting funded, and it was as simple as that. So that's when the research programs got shut down, and the things that Mark and I fundamentally believed in, and that's just that unfortunately is the reality of being an entrepreneur and being involved in a business. One of the hardest things in our growth cycle was, for us, was COVID. We raised a lot of money. It closed a big funding round going into 2020, just as COVID swept around the world. And we were in the enterprise business. So we were selling directly to large brands. And we'd raised money. Yeah. And that money was to the money we rose was to grow research, but also to grow a sales organization.
Yeah, exactly.
Because and we did. We went ahead and grew a sales organization. Now, in hindsight, if we go back to that period of time, we're like, well, how long are we going to be in lockdown? 3 months. World's going to go back to normal in 3 months. Then it's 6 months. Then it's So, and during that time, we kept because everybody believed everything was going to. We kept the foot on the accelerator, and we kept trying to grow the company. Now, in hindsight, you can look back and say, business to business enterprise selling is about building face-to-face connections. I couldn't even interview my VP of sales and my chief revenue officer, let alone the salespeople that we were hiring, training, and then sending out to go, and they couldn't go and visit, so that whole, concept of building relationships in the business to business environment, which we'd done incredibly successfully up until that period. And here we are in our fundamental growth phase, and all of that, we just couldn't do that. So, and in hindsight, it's really easy to say, well, maybe you shouldn't have done that. And I'd be the first person to say, I can look back and say in hindsight, we should have just said, let's just stop and wait. But, that is, very different. That's easy to say with hindsight. Everybody's an expert on what we should and shouldn't have done during COVID today, as we see through infinite reviews and, public examinations of the decisions that have been made. So look, there's a whole bunch of stuff. And look, they're all part, for me, as an entrepreneur, you look at that as, this is, you take the hits as you go, obviously, but these are opportunities to think about how do you learn and how do you grow. I mean, the biggest thing you learn about being an entrepreneur is if you're not failing, you're not learning. If you're not learning, you're not growing. And that's the absolute truth. You don't learn anything where everything is easy and successful.
Hello, thanks for watching this video. Quick note, have you subscribed? Over 90% of people who are watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify or Apple are not subscribed or following. Please do so now. It's so simple. The button will be around the screen somewhere. You either hit subscribe or hit the follow button or leave me a review. It will help me so much, helps me grow as a channel and support my work. So I really appreciate it. Okay, back to the episode. But when you look back, do you see if you could have made it a different business strategic decision that could have taken Soul Machine to a different pathway? Because were you not like eyeing different and now this is a question because you've got companies and business owners listening going, we want to learn from Greg about how can we learn from you about strategic business decisions where we may not see the challenge ahead, but we want to have a scenario for this, a scenario for that, so that if we end up having a competition of some sort or we end up finding it challenging to get a capital raise, this is what we could do. What did you learn from that experience that you can share?
This is some experience of my adventure, my journey as I think about it. Look, at any point in time when you're in business, when you're running your own business, you're an entrepreneur, you make decisions on a day-to-day basis. Now, there are decisions that you make where you know all of the variables and all of the facts, and you make decisions based on those. But there are many, but the vast majority of decisions you make are based on a whole series of assumptions. So, one of the key things that I, say continuously to people that'll listen to me is I don't care whether I'm right or wrong. What I care about is finding out whether I'm right or wrong quickly. Okay? Now, please don't get me wrong. Everybody likes to be right, okay? But, the simple reality is when you're making decisions in a startup in a really complex field where many of the variables are beyond your control, all you can do is saying, these are the assumptions I am making. This is the best decision that I can make today based on those assumptions. Now, the job of me and my team at that point in time, having made that decision to go and do that execute that specific strategy or take that specific action, the most important thing is to prove the underlying assumptions as right or wrong as quickly as you possibly can. Because if you can prove them right or wrong quickly, you can make a better decision. You can change your decision. You can, if you've walked through a door and said, I'm going to go explore that, you can come back and walk through, and create a different door and walk through that. So that, is, for me is one of the most important things in any of the stuff, because you're always dealing with infinite variables. Do I go back? Do I relentlessly go back and examine every decision I made and say, could I have done this differently? Could I have done that better? No, you can't live life like that. You get trapped in a cycle, negative cycle if you're continually questioning that. So you've got to create. For me, you've got to create those systems and those processes where you can say, is this the best decision that we can make? What are the assumptions that we made? Which of these can we prove quickly or not? Which are the ones that are most likely to catch us out? And that's kind of the way I think about, the way forward. and starting, my new business, 80/20, after, Soul Machines, I took a completely blank sheet of paper. Obviously I'm taking all the lessons of my entrepreneurial career to date, but I spent, a good deal of time thinking about how, large language models were going to disrupt the technology industry even more, even further, and what type of company did I want to create in what I'll call I call it the native AI era. What type of company did I want to create? How did I want to fund it? What types of resources did I want? I believe the organizational structure of a company needs to change. The culture of companies needs to change. And so most of what I talk about, and I think about, and what I think, in my new world, in this native AI world, is the human application, or the way it impacts the human experience in the AI world. You think about it. Innovation in organizations in any business has, always been driven from the top down. So back in the Soul Machines era, most of the work I'd be doing would be with a chief innovation officer, at a Fortune 100 company in the US, JP Morgan, Pfizer, General Motors, chief innovation officer. So innovation historically has been driven from the top down, from the C-suite down. AI has now come along, and ChatGPT, if I use the generic, has come along and democratized knowledge. So innovation is now driven, seriously, innovation is driven from the bottoms up. Innovation anywhere can be driven by anybody. Now, that sounds like a really, really simple concept, but when you apply that to a very, very large organization that can only innovate in one way and only do strategy in one way, when there's a whole class of what I call emerging class of workers who are completely native AI, they do everything in the AI world, who are just the absolute innovators of the future.
Is this why? Is it Air New Zealand? They went off and did their own Oscar.
No, because this predates the shift. The Oscar thing was that was pretty early on, and it was.
Did they pull out of?
No, it was only ever intended to be a small pilot. So
because they had a really cool pilots going for.
And look, the simple reality is, we did, most of what we did here in New Zealand was, relatively small pilots.
Because you're always intended, because you're a bit of an evangelist for building amazing companies in New Zealand and then taking it to overseas to get funded, get backed, and also target the bigger markets in the US. That's what you've done.
Because the New Zealand market's not big enough to prove anything. As our pilot programs here in New Zealand prove, most New Zealand companies are not particularly innovative with new technology. We are, we are very risk averse. We are very conservative in the application of new technology.
They will wait for the big market companies to do their thing, and then they watch it, and then they'll take it on board.
We tend to be a company that, a country now, because it is part of our culture, because we sort of talk about our number 8 wire mentality and our innovative approach, but we're not really early adopters of technology here in this country anymore. Maybe never were. We're, as I say, our corporate environment is very conservative, very risk averse, and it's become more and more so over the years. So, from our point of view, the pilots we did here were always, they were interesting. They connected us, they gave us the opportunity to show people what we were doing locally, but they were always time-bound projects, which, nobody had a commitment to, go forward with. So unless they chose to, which, obviously they didn't.
Why didn't they, do you think?
As I say, that's their decision. They're their decisions. Our company wasn't, I know there's been a lot of reporting, it becomes really easy to talk about, they did this Air New Zealand pilot. It was a pilot. It was literally done for I don't know, I can't remember, 12 weeks maybe, and it was time bound. It was, would we have liked it to have gone further? Yes. Did it matter that it didn't to us? No, not at all.
No.
Our focus was, some of the multi-million-dollar deals that we're doing with, big brands and big corporations, and frankly, in America and other parts of the world. Yeah.
Was it intended to be a high-end, expensive offering?
Well, because at that stage, if you go back and look at the AI market back in 2016 in that era, there was no consumer application of AI at all back in that era. There was there was nothing. So the only way you could sell an AI product and AI technology was to the large corporate business business to business enterprise market. Yeah. So completely different to what drove the turning point for OpenAI and ChatGPT was they stumbled across a consumer app that went nuts, literally. So it wasn't let's be clear. I mean, the ChatGPT wasn't a planned business model. It just happened. It just went organically happened. So there was, if you go back to that time, there was lots of, analysis of and evaluation as to how ChatGPT, OpenAI was ever going to survive, and what their business model was going to be and how they were going to make money. I mean, that was just continuous at that point in time, and they were because they were Silicon Valley, and there was a bunch of great engineering people in that team. They had access to Silicon Valley money, but it was in the tens of millions of dollars, not the tens of billions of dollars that we see today. So completely different. The shift and the speed of which the shift is quite dramatic.
Did you guys end up having? I'm really interested to learn from this. Have anchor customers who believed in what you were doing and took it on board and went with it?
Yeah, we had a number of big companies that committed and signed multi-million-dollar contracts. That's what the end of the day, they're the part of the milestones you need to achieve in order to get your next round of funding. So that was track. As I say, that was tracking well. As I say, right through into the COVID era. So
Do you feel like you could have done something different with the technology to have taken it to the next step, and where AI cannot compete with you?
So it's not about. Because large language models are largely we're largely a complementary technology to what we're doing. So once again, this is a little bit technical, but before large language models came along, the versions of the models which created the underlying language that AI used were involved a lot of human content creation. So the previous models like IBM Watson, for example, and some of the original. They weren't large language models, but the language models that we were using before the large language models came along, a lot that content had to be, required a lot of human effort. So, large language models, when that, it democratized, it made content, way more accessible and way more available. So, it wasn't, and that in itself created momentum for us. The issue wasn't, competing with large language models. It was a very, very complementary technology. The issue was, ultimately came down to the funding of research and but at the same time, when, large language models came along, it disrupted it disrupted the software market, because all of a sudden people are saying, okay, what do we spend our money on? I mean, we've seen numbers of cycles of this. beginning of last year, we had a whole bunch of big corporates coming out saying, we don't have to spend money on CRM systems. We don't need to buy Salesforce licenses anymore because we can build our own.
Would you say that
all of that, all of that disrupts?
Would you say that AI disrupted the venture that you started?
Of course,
and it just put you out of business.
Well, look, I wasn't there for the last 3 years, so I'm not going to pass judgment on the way in which the board and the executives that took over from me ran the company. That's not my job. But at
the time, actually, no, because when you were still around, what was the AI chatter about?
When I was still around, the AI,
like 2022 or 2023, because that's when
2023, 24.
Was that when ChatGPT was coming around?
It was, obviously ChatGPT was.
It was just in the early stages, though, wasn't it?
It had become a massive consumer technology very, very quickly.
Yes.
What it did do was it slowed down
if you think about,
it slowed down the enterprise AI market, because all of a sudden the focus in the AI market, because if you think, as we're just talking about, in the, up until 2022, 23, the AI market was completely an enterprise market. Big companies buying AI platforms and doing innovation projects with AI platforms, looking at the way you could use AI platforms in their e-commerce sites and their digital tools, etc. And then all of a sudden ChatGPT came along, and now ChatGPT and then Claude, the first. Well, still largely, a big part of their revenues are driven by what they sold to consumers. Yep. So, that created, as well as sucking up all the research funding, that created a period whereby, a lot of companies, didn't buy enterprise AI. They stopped. We're going to stop and wait and see what happens. And you see over and over. You can, if you read the press, you get lots of journalists are quite happy to write articles that say, companies are investing huge amounts in their AI and they're not getting any return on their investment. You read, you read, you can read endless articles, about that, and that's just the press cycle. My view is, a lot of companies don't get return on their AI investment because they're looking at it the wrong way. Is my absolute view. But that's just my just my opinion. But look, there was there's all of these different factors, all of these different angles that were playing out at the same time. It's been as I say, incredibly dynamic period of change for not just the AI industry, but for the software industry as a whole at this point.
I want to find out, how did you feel about the news when, I know you're not involved, but when you did hear the news about the receivership news, how did you feel about it?
Of course, you're incredibly sad. We'd had, because of our inability to raise new capital and to fund the research. We'd been through a series. Even when I was there, we'd been through a series of layoffs and downsizing, and that's not never a fun thing to go through. It is a reality for a lot of startups and a lot of and when you're an entrepreneur, it is a reality. So and in each of one of those, it is incredibly hard because it affects real people and people that you have a relationship with and people that you've worked with. So when I didn't have any forenotice or when I saw the announcement, how do I feel? Of course, incredibly sad, because it's it's something when I was from your point, Mark and I had founded it, and the years we were it was something we literally lived and breathed 24/7. So it's never it's really, really disappointing, and to see that news and realize that that's where that's where the journey's ended. Yeah. So as I say.
Yeah. It's interesting. I want to understand what you think about the economy. I know this is a big question, but you've lived a long, very rich life in the business world in New Zealand and in America. What do you see at the moment with the New Zealand economy and how we're going as a country? Like, just from maybe an outsider looking in, going, and this is what I really think. Like, I think we're really going well, or very slow, or I'm interested to find out.
Clearly it's very, very tough. Yeah. It's been a very, very tough few years for our economy. Look, the simple reality is we're a very small country. We exist on the edge of the world, and we're very as an economy, as a country, we experience the bumps of what goes on around us, in a very very meaningful way. So it's been, it is a challenging time, but at the end of the day, we face challenges on many different levels at this point of view, at this point in time. We've followed the US down the route of more tribal politics at this point in time. So our political discourse is way more tribal at this point in time. We've had relatively stable government under MMP because of the centrist approach. We're now seeing the centrist parts of our political landscape fragmenting at this point in time, and our two major parties are now completely dependent on more extreme versions of and extreme representatives. And there are pluses and minuses to that, but it is what it is. Some of the biggest challenges for us come down to, because I always at the end of the day, I always come back to our people, and and the things that really worry me if I look back on my career. I mean, what we can achieve in healthcare and education. We're going backwards at the moment. At this point in time, when we have parts. I grew up in rural New Zealand, and I got a great education at primary school, and I got the same healthcare in a rural town as you can get in a big city, and that's just not the case today. So, so at an infrastructure level, I think we face some really big decisions about, what we focus on and how we do things and how we bring people together. I mean, we've seen. And because we've had, like many countries in the world, we're seeing huge shifts in the demographics of our population base, at the moment, and Maori will grow from the Maori population of New Zealand. The iwi population will go from around 15% to close to 30% over the next few decades. That's huge. I mean, and you look at, how important, how we think about investing in healthcare and education outcomes, at the moment, to ensure that we have, in the future, we have an incredibly, well and educated society. Because at the end of the day, I'll always go back to those as, the fundamentals of, what we're responsible for in society is, at the end of the day, you've got to provide our, people with a great, good education and good healthcare. I mean, both, they are the building blocks. And it doesn't feel like we're making much progress with those building blocks at the moment. They're the biggest things that concern me. And I think, if and I go back to some of my earlier comments, these are areas where, these are areas where, AI as a utility can be, in my view, can be incredibly transformative. In terms of, in terms of the way in which we think about, how we change those problems. What concerns me, is if we try and try and orchestrate the transformation within the existing bureaucracies and the organisational structures and business environments, it won't happen quickly enough. Because it requires a completely different focus. You see the the throwaway comment in the media that we're going to lay off 7,000 public servants and replace them with AI. I mean, I think that was something that was said recently, and that makes absolutely no sense. I mean, and it's not even correct, because they won't be replaced by AI. They just won't be replaced, and the service levels will get dumbed down. The big companies in the US that say they're laying off people because of AI, no, they're laying off people because they recruited too many people during the good times, and now they can't afford them. So, AI is getting used as the excuse over and over again. We see it. AI is a tool for growth and innovation and genuinely solving problems that we haven't been able to solve before. And if we continue to try and approach it as a cost-saving technology, as a cost-saving tool, we will never see the benefits for it. And as I say, in areas like education and healthcare, we're already at a critical point. So, it worries me that that we won't make the shifts quickly enough.
Quite profound. It's interesting hearing that, because I've had a lot of economists on the show recently, and I had social scientists on, and obviously business owners, and I'm really now, and I just released another montage episode from previous guests talking about, are we actually in crisis? In fact, I don't know when this episode was released in relation to this episode, but people seem to think there's a lot of problems going on with the country. And I'm interested to hear how, from your point of view, in terms of the economy and businesses and making money from business as opposed to making money from other ways, like buying and selling homes.
Sure.
How are we doing in that sphere and being rich through that way?
Yeah, I mean, that's a layered, it's an incredibly layered question. I mean, New Zealand is a small country of small to medium business owners. At the end of the day, yes, we have our big industries and our big companies like the Fonterras of this world, but we have this huge, population base of people like yourself who choose to run your own business and own your own business and create, make an impact and make a difference in your own way. And the thing that gives me a lot of heart and a level of optimism is, look, people adapt, and things might be tough, and we have to put up when times are tough, and we have to make different decisions, and we have to earn our way back to being able to think about doing it. And I still think there's a good there is ways that we can fix this, and the ways in which it can change. So it's because at the end of the day, we all have to take responsibility for for ourselves and our livelihoods and our family and and the communities in which we live in. So at the end of the day, we get on and live. I mean, it's it's not as if we're, or maybe we are growing, we're starting to see the shadow of another world war, but, we're not having food rationed or, petrol rationed or anything like that. I mean, these are things that I've experienced in my lifetime. So, it's, it's very easy to get into a negative frame, about this. And, the next few months aren't going to be particularly helpful as we go into an election cycle, and, the negative stories, take the headlines because, as we're already starting to see. So, but from a business perspective, look, I think, you can take enormous heart from, the fact that, yes, we've been through, a period where a lot of businesses have failed, and but we're also seeing new businesses be created and people picking up the pieces and carrying on. We're seeing enormous growth in the size of our tech sector, and in New Zealand, not just and the exports and the dollars that drives. We're seeing enormous growth in our iwi economy, our Maori economy at this point in time. So, I mean, there are some, I can find things I can get excited about and I can be optimistic about and all of that, and telling those stories becomes really, really important as well, because it's way easier to do the negative stuff these days. So
that's right. I thank you so much for having a chat. It's been good to, just explore different things and touch on different ideas and stories, and actually just reflection and learning from you, because you've been in this for so long. You've seen a lot of things go up and then come down and then maybe stay up, all that kind of stuff. But it's been really nice to hear from you. And I wondered if you wanted to tell people how can they reach out if they have any question or want to learn about your newest ventures that you were up to, by the way.
Yeah, sure. You can always find me on LinkedIn. So Greg Cross NZ. So, I mean, I'm there. People can, you can email me, greg@crossventures.co.nz. That's been my email address for a very long time. I'm always interested to, always happy to share, some of the things I've learned. I've kind of always approached life, from the fundamental point of view. We have a choice as to whether we learn or whether we die. So there are two modes in life. In my mind, learning at a fundamental level, you're either learning something new every day or you're choosing not to. And if you're choosing not to, you're dying. And I just look at, what's happened over the last few years. And we just, everybody on the planet has this amazing opportunity to learn how to solve the problems in their lives differently with the tools that we now have today. And so I've never been more excited about, what we can do, for ourselves on a day-by-day basis.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Greg.
My pleasure. Hope it's interesting.
It is very interesting. And until next time.